How's it going, everybody? My name is John, and today we have a multitude of stories to discuss. I take 1 week off, just 1 week off to celebrate my fiance's 21st birthday, and this is what happens. We have a bunch of stories to cover, a literal pile up, from national stories to stories that revolve around one city in particular, the most famous city in the world. And that would be the NYC election for mayor, which early voting has already started for. So we're going to start with that one because it's clearly the most prevalent. The race has primarily come down to two candidates, being Zohran Mamdani and Andrew Cuomo. There's also Curtis Silwa, but he doesn't have a realistic chance of winning. The only thing that I wanted to mention with him was there was a really funny moment during the debate where they're asking them, would you take public transportation? And Curtis Silwa does his best Curtis 50 Cent Jackson impression and goes, well, I try to avoid yellow cabs since I was shot 5 times in one back in the 90s.
And you can't take the train. Do you hail a taxi? Do you use rideshare? Mr. Sliwa, what do you do?
I try to avoid yellow cabs. As you know, I was shot in the back of a yellow cab in 1992 by the Gottis and Gambinos.
Many men wish death upon me.
And it's like, dude, what are we doing here? That was actually a really funny answer. But apart from that, Silwa has made no headlines because there's no realistic chance of him winning. The person who is likely going to win, the person that I think is going to win, is Zohran Mamdani. And let's talk about that. How is it that NYC is going to elect somebody that is an open socialist? And why is it that people like me, and even people that are farther on the right than me, as my beliefs are more center-right, wouldn't vote for Cuomo over him, despite the fact that Cuomo has tried to appeal to right-wingers and tried to paint Mamdani's policy as super radically left, and that Cuomo would be a better choice for right-wingers? Why is it that people like me who are in the center or on the right are close to endorsing Zohran Mamdani? I don't live in New York, so I can't vote for him. And not that my endorsement would mean much. All 770 of my subscribers could go and vote for him. It would make a massive impact on the election, I'm sure. But why is it that I would support him? I do have a lot of disagreements with Mamdani. I don't agree with a lot of the socialist policy. I did some research into his beliefs and what I believe the policy he would pass as NYC mayor would be. And I don't agree with a lot of it. He's in support of gender-affirming care, which I just call transgender surgeries. The fact that he even refers to it as gender-affirming care means that his beliefs are completely skewed to mine, but he's in favor of it, probably believes that it's life-saving if you were to ask him, as he doesn't want to alienate the far-left fan base that he has. Then you have the fact that he wants to have government-regulated grocery stores to sell things at wholesale price, which sounds good on paper, but you don't want the government controlling those grocery store prices. Because what happens if the government sells at wholesale price and then the actual businesses, especially small businesses, which there's a lot of in New York because you have so many different ethnicities and cultures, you have a lot of businesses, small businesses that are dedicated. For example, there's probably a store in New York that specifically sells Chinese food or stuff that's imported from China, and that's likely run by a small family. Well, the government, if they're able to sell things at wholesale price while the small businesses aren't, the government supermarkets are going to get prioritized over those other markets, and they will be run out of business. And once they're run out of business, how do we know that the government won't go jacking up the prices? We will have no alternatives to those government supermarkets. Those are just a couple of the things that I disagree with Mamdani about. But despite that, I still find him more of an appealing option than Andrew Cuomo. Andrew Cuomo, on the other hand, was the former governor of New York, the state, and he served from 2013 to 2021. And I think we can all agree, no matter what side of the political spectrum you're on, left, right, independent, that Andrew Cuomo did not do a good job with New York during his governorness. He didn't do a good job at all. I went to New York multiple times. As you guys can tell, I don't live there, but I've been there multiple times. NYC feels like kind of a shithole, especially if you're in like the touristy areas in Manhattan. You have constantly homelessness. You have trash everywhere. The streets don't look good. You have scammers everywhere trying to just exhume money from people, a lot of which are illegal immigrants running these Ponzi schemes, trying to sell fake bags or make you take a picture and then try to beg you and manipulate you for money. These are all negatives in NYC that no doubt got way worse under Andrew Cuomo. And a lot of the stuff that Andrew Cuomo speaks about being against in terms of Mamdani's policy, he presents himself as a healthier alternative, and he pitches to Republicans that the right wing should vote for him to avoid this socialist policy. Well, I would argue that Andrew Cuomo during his governor reign didn't do anything to rein in those radical leftist policies. For example, gender affirming care. Did that get more or less popular under Andrew Cuomo? Did that become more universal in New York under Andrew Cuomo? The answer is yes. Did homelessness get worse under Andrew Cuomo? The answer is yes. Did the budget in New York get any better under Andrew Cuomo? The answer is no. Basically, every metric you can measure New York by got worse under Andrew Cuomo. Mamdani, on the other hand, he might have these socialist ideas. For example, he wants to make free public transportation, and he has what I've heard as a $1.4 billion plan to make that happen. Like I mentioned, he wants the government-run grocery stores that sell at wholesale price. He wants universal health care. He wants universal child care. When you have Andrew Cuomo, who was in charge of New York, and things get worse under his moderate, or what I call the corporate establishment Democrats, okay, sure, Mamdani might be spending a lot of money and it might go badly, but that's the key word there is might. It's untested. Socialism is bad on the surface. A lot of people like myself who are anti-government, and that's both sides of the government. I think that they should basically be as passive as possible. They should, obviously the government has to be involved in the justice system. To a certain extent, it has to be involved in the medical system, the schooling system, police, firefighters. But outside of that, like for example, they just passed a law in our state banning people from chewing Zyn during like sporting events. To me, this is government overreach. I am very much libertarian in the mindset that I think the government should ease back its regulations as much as possible. Socialism works in direct contrast to that, like, for example, the way I explained with the supermarkets, if there were government-run supermarkets. But when you have massive poverty and massive unrest and massive homelessness under Andrew Cuomo and under Democrat rule, the current governor of New York is also a Democrat, although I don't remember her name. But that's a bad thing. Why do I not know the governor of New York's name? Because they're passive. The establishment Democrats don't do really anything for New York. Mamdani is completely untested. Like I said, I completely disagree with them. But this, to me, is the biggest talking point as to why people would elect Zohran Mamdani. And this is a clip that you guys might have seen. In the Democratic primary debate for mayor, who was actually going to be the Democratic nominee, you had Mamdani, you had Cuomo, and you had at least two other people on stage. And the moderator for the debate asked them, well, where would you go as your first foreign visit after becoming mayor of NYC? The first lady goes, I would visit the Holy Land.
Where would you go first? Left to right, Ms. Adams.
First visit, I would visit the Holy Land.
Mr. Cuomo?
Given the hostility and the anti-Semitism that has been shown in New York, I would go to Israel.
Mr. Tilson, where would you go?
Yeah, I'd make my fourth trip to Israel, followed by my fifth trip to Ukraine, two of our greatest allies fighting on the front lines of the global war on terror.
Mr. Mamdani?
I would stay in New York City. My plans are to address New Yorkers across the 5 boroughs and focus on that.
Mr. Mamdani, can I just jump in? Would you visit Israel as mayor?
I've said in a UJA questionnaire that I believe that you need not travel to Israel to stand up for Jewish New Yorkers. And that is what I will be doing as the mayor. I'll be standing up for Jewish New Yorkers, and I'll be meeting them wherever they are across the 5 boroughs, whether that's in their synagogues and temples or at their homes or at the subway platform.
But Zohran Mamdani says, I would stay in America. You know, if I need to speak to my Jewish constituents, and then they ask him, are you saying that you wouldn't go to Israel? No, I just feel like I would, have more value to my constituents, even the Jewish ones, if I stayed here in NYC. He's the mayor of NYC. What business does the mayor of New York City have to do with the Israeli government? What does him going to Israel do? Mamdani says that he'll visit his Jewish constituents in temples and synagogues. That right there, that one clip alone might have single-handedly stopped a lot of far-right votes, people that are swaying away from Israel. Recently, you have Nick Fuentes appearing on Tucker Carlson. You have Candace Owens constantly speaking out against Israel. Matt Gaetz goes off against Israel. And then you have Andrew Cuomo, who's positioning himself as like, oh, the right doesn't have a chance in this election, but I'm a more moderate Democrat. I can appeal to you. But meanwhile, I'm concerned with the foreign policy of a nation that's like 5,000 miles away and I have nothing to do with. Mamdani might have won the election simply with that quote right there. So in summary, do I agree with Mamdani's principles? No. I don't agree with them at all. I believe in meritocracy. I don't believe that social services should be spread so much. But when Mamdani says a plan like universal health care for somewhere like New York, where I'm sure the premiums are higher than almost anywhere else in the country, as the prices for everything in New York are higher than nearly anywhere else in the country, maybe with the exception of Los Angeles, Mamdani comes and says, yeah, free universal childcare, free universal health care. There's countries in Europe that have free universal health care, and they don't have these poverty rates. They don't have people abusing the system up the wazoo to the point where it makes life unlivable for people who aren't using that universal basic health care. And I would imagine, being the mayor of NYC, Mamdani is not going to have the power to take away people's private insurance options. Universal health care with privatized health insurance still being available doesn't sound that bad to a New York that is struggling. They're struggling financially, and paying health insurance for some people who barely ever use it is a hindrance. It's a massive hindrance. I almost wish that they had basic universal health care where I live in Michigan, because I'm a 24-year-old young man. I don't have any health issues. I haven't been to the doctor in the last year and a half. Why am I paying these insane insurance prices? So, yeah, it might be socialist, but then you have Andrew Cuomo. Andrew Cuomo, like I said, Mamdani has these socialist policies to do with gender-affirming care, probably is in support of taxpayer-funded transgender surgeries, which I am vehemently against. But what has Andrew Cuomo done to stop that? Like I said, are these things getting more or less popular under Andrew Cuomo? Are we moving closer towards taxpayer-funded transgender surgeries in New York while not Chris Cuomo, that's his brother, while Andrew Cuomo was the governor? The answer is yes. We're moving closer to those policies anyway. At least Mamdani is honest. At least he's honest. And like I said, I wouldn't vote for the guy because I have so many principled disagreements with him. But I'm not voting for Cuomo. Absolutely not. And no right-winger should be voting for Cuomo. And they're demanding that Silwa drop out of the election so that way Andrew Cuomo even has a chance of beating Mamdani. Well, even if Silwa dropped out, it would still be dead even. And based on the polls I've been seeing, Mamdani would still have the edge in the election. You have to wonder, why is it so bad? Well, that's because people are disillusioned with capitalism. They're disillusioned with the Democratic and the Republican Party. This is a wake-up call. The fact that an open socialist can win the election, trumping the Democratic and the Republican Party. I know that Zohran Mamdani is the candidate for the Democrats and Cuomo's technically the independent. But Cuomo more closely represents the values of the Democratic Party than Mamdani does. Do you think Barack Obama would go? I know he endorsed Zohran Mamdani, but do you think Barack Obama would go out and propose free universal health care? Well, maybe he would because he did Obamacare. But would Obama propose taxpayer-funded transgender surgeries? Would Obama propose free public transportation? Would Obama propose government-run grocery stores? Most likely not. And that more closely aligns with Cuomo. But when you have Mamdani, who's saying that he'll bring something different when NY has been in such disillusion for however long it's been in this downwards decline, Mamdani seems like a possible option. Like, okay, let's try him. You know, nobody thinks that Mamdani is going to become a dictator and they won't be another mayor election in the future. You know, why not try him? So I find it difficult to root against Zohran Mamdani. And then you have the fact that there's been one major talking point against Zohran Mamdani. And that was a quote that he said that his aunt, and that's very specific, that's going to come up. His aunt felt like a victim after 9/11 being attacked by Islamophobia. And she was scared to ride the subway wearing her, is it a hijab? I don't want to misspeak on that. I'm not trying to disrespect the Muslim religion, of course. But Zohran Mamdani said that his aunt was scared to ride the NYC subway because of anti-Islam sentiment following the 9/11 terror attacks. And a lot of people are painting this as, how could Zohran Mamdani say that he's the victim of 9/11? The victims are the people that were, tragically lost their lives, and the American people who lost over 2,000 citizens. And of course, America is the victim of 9/11. I don't think Mamdani is trying to say that they're not. I don't think that anybody would argue that America is the victim of 9/11. Of course, it was extremely tragic. And as an American myself, it is heinous, and I frown upon that terror attack to the largest and the biggest extent that I possibly can. But when Zohran Mamdani says that his aunt felt scared riding the subway after that, that makes sense. Because after 9/11, I remember what I was taught in school. I was born the same year that 9/11 happened. I remember what I was taught as a young little boy. I was taught to be afraid of Muslims. I was taught to be afraid of them if they were wearing their hijabs or if they had their faces covered. I was taught to be afraid and to be, I guess, Islamophobic. Do I think Islamophobia is this rampant problem running through the country? Not necessarily, especially not in NYC, which is such a diverse place as it is. But do I understand where Mamdani could be coming from and saying that his aunt felt afraid to ride the subway after 9/11? Yeah, that makes sense to me. Because I could imagine in NYC, especially if someone lost a family member and then you see a woman in her hijab riding down the subway, you might harass her. They might say something to her. They might even physically assault her. These are all things that are fairly realistic, especially since they were training us to be against the Muslims and dehumanize them. So that way we can run our campaigns in Iraq, for example. So I understand where he's coming from there. But the other big talking point against Mamdani involving that same quote, people were saying that he was lying by calling his aunt, because technically it's not his dad's sister, but his dad's cousin. Let me put this to you guys right now. I have a cousin who's 4 years younger than me, right? So we're basically the same age. We grew up extremely close. We, have a lot of the same interests. We both root for the Red Wings. We both have a lot of the same interest, and we're extremely close. We hang out all the time. My kids are not going to refer to him as cousin or whatever else. He's going to be uncle. He's going to be uncle. It's not rocket science here. If I have a cousin who's about the same age as me and we grow up like brothers and then I have a kid, that will be his uncle. And maybe not his technical uncle, but him calling that person an uncle is normal. And there's nothing unusual about it. You have sometimes people that are not even related that get referred to as somebody's uncle. Like if you have a best friend growing up, and that best friend is around a lot after you have your kid, that will be uncle whoever, to that child. So these are stupid talking points. They're nitpicks. And when they make dumb points like that, and you have establishment Republicans like Ted Cruz making those points against Mamdani, you have Andrew Cuomo running it up the wazoo. These are established politicians that I think most people agree are pretty crappy. it makes Mamdani's campaign and his will seem even better. It makes him seem more credible as a candidate when you have people trying to denounce him over stupid things that a majority of the American people do. You never had an auntie before? You never had someone that was called uncle or aunt in your family that wasn't actually your dad's brother or your dad's sister? It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. And it makes these politicians seem completely out of touch. And it makes Mamdani more relatable to the American people. It's almost suspiciously bad as a talking point against Mamdani. But anyway, that's all I got to say about him. Moving on to the next story, and this one relates to me personally. A post by Leading Report on X said that Gen Z men are becoming more independent. They're being disillusioned with Donald Trump, but they're not going towards the Democrats. Good morning. Gen Z men are being disillusioned. They're drifting away from Donald Trump, but they're also not going to the Democrats. And a lot of people don't seem to understand why that is. Well, let me run you through a few reasons. Trump lost a lot of young voters because in this second term, he has not been following all of the campaign promises that he made when running for president. For example, these are some of the biggest ones. Trump bombs Iran. He pulls open the chair for Bibi Netanyahu. He seems more Israel first than America first. It seems like it's going to make Israel great again, then make America great again. Then you have these stupid statements that Trump makes that are really difficult to defend. For example, Trump puts out a statement on his Truth Social saying Biden had 274 federal agents involved in January 6th. But Biden wasn't president during January 6th. Like, what do you mean? It's a logic fail. These are constant, stupid statements coming out of the Trump administration, or in his Truth Social in particular. Then you have the whole Jeffrey Epstein issue. You have the fact that Donald Trump ran on releasing the Epstein files. You can find a clip dating back all the way to 2015 where Donald Trump says that Bill Clinton is going to be in deep water due to his connection with the Epstein files.
Bill Clinton. Nice guy. Got a lot of problems coming up, in my opinion, with the famous island with Jeffrey Epstein. A lot of problems.
But now, all of a sudden, now that Trump's president, the Epstein files are a hoax. They're a leftist made-up claim. And it's stupid. It's ridiculous. That's just a few of the reasons why the Gen Z men are turning away from Trump. But at the same time, no matter how bad Trump is, a lot of Gen Z men are still going to default to him as an option or default to the Republican Party. Because if you're like me, a lot of Gen Z men see the Democratic Party as an existential threat to America. And that's not all Democrats, and I don't mean Democrat voters. I mean, in particular, Democrat elitists like Joe Biden, like Kamala Harris, like Nancy Pelosi. These are people that are untrustworthy, I would say, to a majority of Americans, including a lot of Democrat voters. I feel my beliefs are intrinsically liberal. Like, for example, I've gone into this before, but I'll rehash it. My beliefs on transgenderism is if you are a grown adult over the age of 18 and you choose to identify as a different gender, there is nothing I can do to stop you. If you want to get those surgeries, you can get those surgeries as long as they're privately funded and they're not funded by my taxpayer dollars, because I work extremely hard and I want my taxpayer dollars going to something that I at least relatively agree with, as opposed to something that I'm vehemently against and see as delusion. But like I said, despite that, if you're transgender and you're an adult, I don't have anything particularly against you. I'm not going to use your preferred pronouns. You're not going to be able to police my speech, but at the same time, I'm not against it. But the Democrats, on the other hand, if you misgender somebody, that can be seen as misinformation, or it can be seen as harassment, which to me is extremely wrong. Doesn't make any sort of sense. The Democrats also have, they want drag queens in schools teaching kids, which there's multiple videos of. They want to be taught, they want these kids to learn LGBTQ ideology while they're extremely young. And like parents have the option to opt their child out of sex ed, I think I should be able to opt my child out of learning about these ideologies. I want my kids learning the core 4 tenets. I want science, I want social studies, I want math. What's the 4th one? Oh my God. English, like language arts. Oh my God, that was awful. But I want my kids learning these four main core curriculum assignments. Let's say I don't want them to learn that. They should be able to opt out. The Democrats don't necessarily agree with that, or they're not even willing to say it. Because if a Democrat says that, if they say, we don't think that LGBTQ information should be in schools, we don't think that there should be like naked drag queens in front of children in these public parades, if you speak out against it at all, you're going to lose that small section of the left who would be their voters. And when you have elections contested as tightly as they've been in this country, particularly since Donald Trump has been in office, you can't afford to lose those voters. But it's for that reason that people like me and Gen Z men in particular see the Democratic Party as an actual threat to democracy. And then you have the fact that the Democrats also support Israel. You have Biden, who handled the Russia-Ukraine conflict horribly, handled the Israel-Gaza conflict horribly, continues to pump dollars to Israel, taking money from AIPAC. It's, you don't really see an alternative. And that's where Gen Z men feel homeless. We feel like there is no political home for us. If you just have common sense and you look at both sides and you disagree with some things the Republicans say and you disagree with some things that the Democrats say, both sides alienate you. And I speak from experience. Whenever I post any sort of video criticizing the Republicans or the Democrats, I constantly get hounded. Even when I make a video specifically bipartisan, like for example, the government shutdown, I believe that that's a bipartisan issue. There is stuff that the Republicans need to compromise on, and there's stuff that the Democrats are doing wrong that they need to compromise on. To quickly summarize, the Democrats are trying to reverse Trump's laws that he passed in the big, beautiful bill that were lawfully put in action. Donald Trump did win the election. He won all 7 swing states. You might disagree with those policies in the big, beautiful bill. You might even say that they're dictatorial. You can disagree with them vehemently, and that's fine. You're allowed to voice your opposition, of course. But they passed in the Senate. They passed in the House. Donald Trump is a, democratically elected president, and his laws should be able to stand. In particular, the one that the Democrats are trying to reverse is the 20-hour work week requirements in order to have government assistance. For SNAP benefits. You need to have 20 hours work week if you're an able-bodied adult. This doesn't apply to children. This doesn't apply to parents. This doesn't apply to people who are mentally or physically disabled. This is a policy that I point out as an example because I agree with that. I think that we do need some sort of regulation or work requirements for people to be on SNAP. They're talking about 40 million people that are going to lose their SNAP benefits. Why do we have 40 million people on government assistance? That's 1/10 of the population that get an EBT card and need government assistance with food. We have to step back and think, why is there this much poverty? Why is there this much unrest and people needing help? And what is supposed to be the most developed and advanced nation in the world? Well, the reason why I bring that up is to say the Democrats are trying to reverse his policy. That's why I blame them for the shutdown. They're unwilling to compromise. The the Republicans tried to pass a bill in the House that would keep SNAP benefits going until November 21st. The reason why the Democrats would want to vote against that is because in the Affordable Care Act that Biden passed, there was a specific law that capped insurance premiums at 8.5%. The Republicans refused to renew it. It expires in 2025, and the Republicans are refusing to renew it. Any CR that they're proposing does not have that specific policy in there. Now, the Republicans say, well, you know, there's illegals and we're trying to crack down on freeloaders and all this stuff. Well, that 8.5% insurance cap wouldn't just help people on the bottom who have insurance. It would affect everybody. Everybody who has privatized insurance. If that 8.5% cap disappears, insurance companies, we know how scammy and scumbaggy these insurance companies are. They're going to gouge the prices like crazy. And you might think that doesn't affect you. If you have a plan through your work, for example, you might think that that doesn't affect you. Wait until the next open enrollment. So with that being said, both parties have good points and points where they need to compromise. In my video talking about the government shutdown, I mentioned that it's a bipartisan look at why both parties are to blame. And the thumbnail is literally a Spider-Man meme of Chuck Schumer and Donald Trump pointing fingers at each other, because I hold both sides equally accountable. Even when I make a video with that open bipartisan label on it and I address the problems with both sides, you still have both sides arguing in the comments section saying, no, it's their fault, no, it's their fault, or calling me a shill for the opposing side that they disagree with. So the point of me bringing all this up is because Gen Z men, if you have any sort of disagreement with either side, and this isn't just for Gen Z men, this is for everybody, they out you. They get rid of you in the party. They primary you. You have some Republicans like Thomas Massie and Marjorie Taylor Greene, and then Democrats like John Fetterman who are going against party lines. I guarantee you all three of them will be primaried out in the next election cycle that they're in. Because you have Donald Trump working against those Republicans, telling Republicans not to vote for them. And then you have, you know, top tier Democrats saying that John Fetterman probably needs to go. And it's terrible. We just have the both sides alienating. And that's why Gen Z men are going independent, truly just going independent. And it's sad because as a Gen Z man myself who identifies as independent, I used to buy in with the Democratic Party until they kicked me out. I didn't agree that transgender surgeries should be available for children, and they kicked me out. The Republicans, I started to ride with the Republicans. I say, you know, why are we giving $3.8 trillion to Israel? And then they kick me out. So guess what? I'm independent. I don't give a shit anymore. Fuck both of you. Fuck both your stupid sides. And that's where most Gen Z men lie. But moving on to the next story. This story is a tragic one, and viewer discretion is advised here as we're going to touch upon some sensitive topics. Bionca Ellis is a woman, and I don't know what state this happened in, but obviously it happened in the United States. Back in June of 2024, last year, Bionca Ellis was seen in a video walking through a grocery store or some sort of store with a kitchen knife. She then follows a mother who has her 3-year-old little boy out to her car and takes the life of the little boy. His name is Julian Wood, and severely injures the mother. Bionca Ellis, just a few days ago, was charged and convicted on life without the possibility of parole for these actions. But still, in news reports, you have certain people saying that she's the accused.
At home, the woman accused of stabbing a 3-year-old boy to death and seriously injuring his mother.
Take in mind, this is a woman who smiled in the courtroom after that heinous action. Take in mind that this is a woman who maliciously followed them to their car. And then take in mind that this news report calling her accused comes after she was convicted of all charges against her and got life without the possibility of parole.
Bionca Ellis is scheduled to be sentenced at 8:30 in the morning. Earlier this month, Ellis was found guilty of all charges against her, including aggravated murder and assault.
So why are we calling her accused? Well, I can't help but feel we have a racial double standard here. Because it's a black woman taking the life of a young white little boy, this reporter and liberal outlets in general will say she's accused, or try to say, you know, it's her schizophrenia that caused it. You know, she's not actually guilty. She's insane. Well, I would argue this. If your schizophrenia has you to the point where you are walking through a store with a kitchen knife and you maliciously follow a little boy and his mother out to their car and then take the life of the little boy, even if you are insane, get the fuck off my streets. We do not want you on the streets. You are a public nuisance. You are a public danger. You are a threat to society. But despite that, you still see liberal outlets calling her accused. Do you think that if a white man followed a black woman and her 3-year-old son out to the car and took the life of the little boy and severely injured the mother, that reporter would call him accused? It's ridiculous. She's not accused. She's charged with the crime. Not only that, but it's one of the most heinous crimes that I have ever seen. It's one of the most heinous news stories that I've ever seen. And I can't think of any other reason for it besides it being a blatant double standard. And I don't mention this to be one of those guys that says, oh yeah, well my friends are black, so I'm not racist. I genuinely do not have a racist bone in my body. I grew up in school learning about the greatness of Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks. I grew up listening to rap music. I have Nas albums hidden back there. I'm a big fan of Tupac. I believe that the police do target black people. I do believe that they have a lot of systematic problems against them. And I do believe the government is purposely pumping their culture full of vile ideas. For example, somebody like Cardi B, I think is propagated by white industry executives to purposely hold the black culture down. And I feel bad for black people. I grew up on 7 Mile and Hoover in Detroit. Everybody I grew up around was black. We were the only white house in that entire community amongst a bunch of other black people. All my best friends growing up were black. Just a couple to name them. I had Marshawn, I had Will, I had Xavier. These are guys that I can still call great friends and brothers today. But despite that, if I call out something like that as saying, would that double standard be there if it was the opposite scenario, as I explained, people will call me a racist. People will pigeonhole me. And that's why people like me, Gen Z, go independent, because if you point out something that you see with your own eyes, they'll call you racist for it and they'll ostracize you. But moving on to the final story that I have to address today, you have the Department of Homeland Security posting a photo of the Halo video game with the caption, "Stop the Flood." If you guys don't know anything about Halo, in Halo, the Flood are basically an invasive parasitic species that can infect others and, make them also a part of the Flood, as it's called in Halo. And I don't agree with the fact that it's being politicized at all. Politics and entertainment should be completely separate. It's the same reason why I hate that Jimmy Kimmel and Stephen Colbert and Jimmy Fallon and basically every late night show has a left-leaning bias. Because when you make all of the entertainment and every little aspect of life political, you divide people. And when you have both of the sides as divided as they are already, literally we live in different realities. We have different beliefs of science. We have different beliefs of what's healthy, what isn't healthy. When you start politicizing the entertainment like video games, like Halo, you are going to just alienate people to the point where they see no humanity in the other side. And that's what causes this increase in political violence that we've been seeing. Now, it's not fair to only point fingers at the Republicans or the Department of Homeland Security, because the liberals in the past, Halo has also been politicized. You have them releasing Pride and rainbow merchandise, which draws up a lot of bad feelings for people as they feel like this is being promoted to an excessive extent to the point where it feels like a cult. But the point being is, once again, you cannot do this. Both sides need to stop politicizing TV shows, entertainment, movies, late night talk shows, because at the end of the day, it's just going to cause alienation between the two sides to the point where neither side has anything relatable with the other side. Back in the day in our politics, before I was born, both sides had a lot in common. I recently seen a clip of Tucker Carlson having a civilized discussion with Rachel Maddow. Can you imagine that today? It is almost unfeasible. And the reason for that being is because both sides just try to politicize everything. They try to alienate us. They try to rage bait us because ultimately that's what gets clicks. And that's why I feel like this channel doesn't do as successful as maybe it could be. Because what are you going to watch? What seems more appealing as clickbait? Two people screaming at each other, having vehement disagreements, arguing about the most pressing issues of today? Or two people sitting down, having a civilized discussion and coming to a point of compromise? One of them is better than the other, and maybe to a lot of us, adults and people who are mature, that would be the obvious choice. But when you have one completely overriding the other in extreme amounts of clickbait, people who have like this social media mind want that entertainment. Attention spans are shrinking by the day. They want that entertainment. It sucks that politics is entertainment. That's one of the worst things that I think Trump did during his presidency was politics became entertaining. It became entertainment. It became something where you pick, either side almost as if it's a sports team. And that to me is awful. Another terrible thing that Trump did during his presidency was he made politics unprofessional with these ad hominem attacks, personal attacks, character assassinations. All of that is awful because politics should be objective, not subjective. But anyway, that's all I got for you guys today. My throat is starting to hurt. This was a little bit of a long one, but like I said, we had a pile up of news stories. I hope you all enjoyed today's video. Hit like and subscribe if you did. I had to scratch my nose there. I hate that I had to do that in the middle of the take, but it is what it is. But hit like and subscribe if you enjoyed today's video. Let me know if you guys align with any of the beliefs that I stated in this video. I am deeply scared as I believe both sides are heading down dark paths. That's why I do what I do. That's why I make these videos. But anyway, I hope you guys have a good day. Have a happy Halloween. Peace out, everybody.